What's going on, my friends? We are so glad to see each and every one of you here today. Today, we're going to be talking about assimilation and how to make sure those first-time guests actually come back. We've said it many times here at the Idea Network that the problem is not that our churches have a difficult time getting people to visit. We have a difficult time getting people to come back for a second and third and fourth and fifth time. And so proper assimilation is essential. It's one of my favorite conversations. And today, we've got one of the greatest leaders in this realm, Pastor Blake Hunt, who works with me here in Las Vegas at Southern Hills, who's going to be with us today. We're excited about having that. So I'm ready to go. I have my own personalized Southern Hills merch on, and I've got my my Black Spire Outpost coffee mug. And so I'm excited about this conversation today. Jason Schuler, thank you for hosting us today. Kylie, for all you do. Jeremy, for being here. And Blake, awesome. Jeremy, I'm throwing it over to you. Let's get started.
Yes. Welcome, guys. We're glad you're here. Mike Grover, I'm going to ask you to pray for us today. We're really looking forward to coming down to Tampa, spend some time at your ministry for Idea Day South. And why don't you just pray, ask the Lord to bless our time today with Blake, and let us know how your staff's doing real quick, getting ready for this big event. Mike, it's hard to hear. Are you on?
He's muted.
We don't hear you.
It shows that he's not muted, but we can't hear him.
Huh.
Really excited. Mike is going to be teaching a class session on technology, how to use it in Zoom meetings. So that's going to be a great session at Idea Day South.
It might be your computer microphone is turned off. So you may not be muted, but the microphone itself may not be on.
Mike, I love you, but we only have an hour. We're going to move right past you. We'll see you in Tampa. Andrew Peters, would you open us up in prayer here today?
I will. Yes, sir. Can you hear me, Brother Mike? All right, church, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we love you. Thank you for the opportunity to be with this group today. Lord, we're thankful for each and every person that is able to be on today. God, we desire for your will to be done in our churches. And so, Lord, we come today for another area to look at our churches and say, what are some places that we can be better at? And so, Lord, I pray that you speak to each and every one of our hearts this morning. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. We are excited to get into it today. I've got a couple of announcements I want to mention to you before I kick it over to Blake. As Josh has said and Jeremy has said, Tampa is on the 22nd. It's 4 weeks from today. Chicago is 5 weeks from today. Regular registration ends today. Jason, what does that mean? Regular registration ends today. It means that the price goes up tomorrow. So if you are in the business of saving money, today is your day to register. And so make sure you register today. You all received an email yesterday and another one today with information on how to register for the event. So make sure that you register. Kylie also wanted me to say that if you have a charter member voucher, she's holding it up there, a charter member voucher, today is your last day to use that as well. So make sure that you get that in and use it. On a scheduling note, I'm really excited about this announcement of what I'm going to share with you right now. On the 2 Idea Days, the one in Tampa 4 weeks from today and the one in Chicago 5 weeks from today. On both of those days, it falls on a Tuesday, and our roundtable events also fall on a Tuesday. And you may say, Jason, I'm not able to come to Tampa. I'm not able to come to Chicago. Are we still having a roundtable that day? And the good news is that we are going to try to go live on both of those days, live from both of those events, to share a roundtable with you who are not able to make it live and in person to Tampa and Chicago. So you can still enjoy a roundtable on both of those Tuesdays, the 22nd and the 29th. So with that being said, I'm about to kick it over to Blake. There are 7 Sundays in between now and Easter. Easter is April 17th. You're going to have an influx of guests coming to your church between now and then, and certainly right around Easter. Blake's with us today. He's going to be talking about guaranteeing your guests come back and I'm excited about his talk today. Blake, you're up. Thanks for being here today, man.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for having me. Kylie, Jeremy, Pastor Josh, the whole team. I appreciate you guys having me back on. I know a couple months ago, I guess longer than a couple months ago, almost a year ago now, I did one of the first ones on assimilation. So for those of you who were there for that one, I'm going to try not to make it as repetitive, but we are going to focus on some assimilation and retaining, specifically retaining those guests. Like Josh said in the very beginning, most of us don't struggle with people coming to church. We struggle with them coming back to church. So one of the things that I really liked and have a passion for is being able to talk about what we should be thinking about as we bring guests back to church, or as we attempt to get guests back to church. It's one of the biggest passions I have. I've been doing it at Southern Hills for almost 5 years. And in that time, we've been able to see about on average, about 35 to 38% of our guests become members. For us, what that means is 3 to 4 out of every person who walks across the door is saved, baptized, and has gone through 4 to 8 hours of membership classes. I'm not sure what that looks like for you, but that's what that means for us. That would be what I would call our assimilation rate. So one of the biggest things as we jump into this that I find we struggle with as a church is being prepared before the guest comes. One of the reasons the guest doesn't come back is because we're simply not prepared before the guest comes. And what that means is we need to be thinking through basic things like, how do we identify a guest? What does a guest look like in our culture? For us, what even is a guest? For instance, you may have heard the statistic that a growing church has as many guests on Sunday morning as they average throughout the year. So for instance, if you're a church of 200 people, that means you should have 200 guests throughout the year. But what does that mean? Like, who is the guest in that scenario? Are we counting children? What about, Aunt Susie who's visiting from Idaho that just comes on Christmas Eve? Is that a guest for you? These are really key indicators to know how well we're assimilating actual true guests. So my suggestion to you is, as you go back to your staff, one of the big things is identify, what is a guest to us? Does every guest get treated the same? For instance, at Southern Hills, when we have an out-of-town guest, they still get a little gift bag. They still get treated well. They even still get a welcome text that day, but they aren't going to receive the assimilation follow-up, and we're not even going to count them in our numeric value for a guest. We also only count guests that have their own ability to come back. So for us, it's adults only. We count adults like 13 and up. They have their own ability to come back to church. So we don't count kids in our guests. So a church our size may say, okay, we need then 800 adults, local adults. That's how many guests we need in order to become a growing church. One of the biggest reasons I see churches fail in guests because they get depressed and frustrated because really they're counting guests that can never come back to their church. Those Easter guests that are just visiting, the Christmas guests that are there once a year because they're visiting family, those don't count. So stop trying to kill yourself assimilating people who can never come back. Look, we all have fantastic churches. I don't know about you, but I'm not jumping on a plane, riding 5 hours just to go to a church on Sunday, right? So we can't beat ourselves up just for not being able to get that guest to come back. So identifying really what is a guest to your local church and to your local context. Draw those lines, draw those boxes, and really dial in on what that guest looks like. The second thing that I notice on the reason why we fail to bring guests back is really truly this: we fail to identify them when they come back a second time. We have no process of taking count, taking number of our congregation. So oftentimes those guests fall through the cracks. And what happens, sitting in the pastoral role, we think, hey, man, I haven't seen that person in a few weeks and they seem to have a really good time. Let me reach out. And that's the baseline of what our process is like. In order to bring that guest back, we have to have a set aside process to say, every week, I'm going to identify who came back again, right? Who came back again. So having an 8-week list, a 10-week list, a 12-week list, a 1 or a 2 week list, whatever your church decides, you need to be able to identify that second time guest, that person that we look at and say, okay, they're not conjoined to our church yet, right? They're not members of our church yet. They're not even maybe in a group or serving or however you identify membership in your context. They're not that, but they're not a first timer. How do I identify that second time, third time guest? And here's the suggestion is make a cutoff time, make a list, set aside, I'm going to have everybody that's attended the last 8 weeks or visited the last 8 weeks. And after 8 weeks, I'm going to let them go. I'm going to let them go. But contact them for 8 weeks and try to bring them back. And when you bring them back, have a person to identify that second time guest is totally, totally key. Because if we don't do that, then what we're going to find is we're just going to find a lot of disconnected people, hopefully still sitting in our congregation, but still not totally bought into the vision. And that's not something that we want. One of the third things that I see in guests not coming back or being a helpful tool in being able to bring guests back is, what are we pushing our guests' next step to? I don't think as pastors, we think through this enough. Like, what is the actual thing that we're pushing guests to? Is it just Sunday morning attendance? Is it a membership class? Is it a meeting? What is the interaction we are pushing guests towards? For me, the suggestion is simple. I believe deeply in pushing them towards an interpersonal communication time. A time to get on the phone, a time to sit down for coffee is totally key in bringing back that guest and creating buy-in for that guest. So here's the suggestion when it comes to what do I push a guest towards is, want a guest visit Southern Hills. Me and my team reach out and say, we're so glad that you visited. How was your experience today? Something open-ended. After we get that conversation rolling, after a few text messages and a few things, then we invite them for their input, not in a basic email. We do that as well, but that only catches maybe 1 out of every 50 guests for us. So that email survey, if you're having great luck with it, good job. We don't. So what we do is we actually invite people to a coffee with me or with one of our staff and say, hey, we'd love to hear how we can better serve the community. Would you mind sitting down with us and telling us how we could serve this community that you live in better? Why? Because people love talking about themselves. They love giving their input. They love sharing what they know, right? So if we can invite somebody to a meeting and say, you share with me how we can serve you better, they're most likely going to come. And they'll sit down because you're asking them for help. You're not saying, hey, how can I help you? You're asking them, hey, can you help me? Do you mind this? People love to feel asked. They love to feel needed. So play on that a little bit and ask them to that coffee appointment for the purpose of gaining that information. So now that you're there at that coffee appointment, you're gaining that information, you're working through those things, what you need to do is kind of come up with a few core things that you're going to ask. Hey, what do you think about the location of our church? Like, do you think it best serves the community there? Have you heard about some of the outreach programs of our church? Where do you think we could do better? And then as they answer, you begin to craft that conversation towards 4 decisions, 4 potential decisions. You're only going to ask them to act on one of these today, but 4 potential decisions. The way that I do it is this: man, thank you so much for taking your time to be able to share with me how we can get better in the community. Let me ask you a question. Why did you come to church? And oftentimes from that easy answer, I'll be able to find out what 4 of these steps they're on, whether they need salvation, whether they need to be baptized, whether they need to join our church, or whether they need to be discipled. And from there, we kind of walk through what that looks like for them. And I ask very, very openly, hey, do you mind if I share with you some of the ways that we've helped other people before? And most people, 9 out of every 10, are going to be open to that. Be open to that. So pushing to that personal communication is going to be key throughout your assimilation of guests. A really, really big detail, or a really, really big detail. And then the last thing, one of the big 4 that I see on reasons why people don't come back to church is we don't know when they stop becoming guests. Like, we don't have a process set up in place to say this person is now no longer a guest. This person is maybe not family, right? They're not members yet, but they're also not guests. When does that happen? For us, it's the 3rd visit. And for you, it may look like something else, but it is key. Why? Because they've come to your church multiple times. They're no longer a guest. They're not looking for the parking any longer. They're not wandering in and out of the halls of children's ministry. Like, they know where they are. They know what they want to do. Now is the time to be aggressive in pursuing them towards membership. So for us, it's a first time, second time. Then we put somebody in the category of a regular attender, somebody who's not yet a member, who hasn't said, I want to be part of the Southern Hills family, but they have come. They've come regularly. So what do I do with them? What do you do with them? And that's a great time for one of two things. Either inviting them to membership class or inviting them again to that personal interaction. You see, if you go to that meeting the right way and that first time, you're only going to have 1, 2, 3, or 4 decisions, right? You only want to push one decision at a time. We only throw one at bat at a time, right? We don't want to overwhelm people. So maybe for that regular attender, it's time to invite them back to a personal interaction. But maybe for them, it's just time to invite them to a membership class. And that's why it is so important in this overarching 4 reasons that I see, is to really have a person to the process. Look, you all are idea day people. So I'm going to assume that you have a process in place, whether that's a Connect card and sending a coffee cup, or sending a Starbucks gift card, or sending something in the mail, or sending an email. I'd encourage you, reevaluate your process. We reevaluate our process every 3 to 6 months. I'm reevaluating what we can do better, where we're wasting, where we can spend better, but also the importance of having a person to the process. You just having a process, you've won about 50% of the battle. A lot of churches you got a leg up on, but having the person to the process is really what makes you uniquely different. Having that personal touch and that personal interaction cannot replace just the process. So you have to take that time and be able to put in the person to the process. See, none of these things are going to work if you don't have that person. For us, we have multiple people in this process. For you, maybe it's a volunteer to start, or maybe it's just somebody who can donate some hours. Maybe it's a deacon family, or maybe it's a staffer. It can look different in a lot of different ways, but you have to have a person to the process, or the process is going to fall apart. The best processes are fulfilled by people, and we have to make sure that we have that as a key indicator for us. And if we don't, it's going to kind of fall through. Here are some encouraging things as we close up. I got about 3 more minutes, I think, until we have to break for roundtable, or for breakouts. Sorry. So here are 3 things that'll help you as you look for the person in the process. First and foremost, look for a person who will follow the process. Look for a person who will keep statistics on the process, and look for a person who's personable. These are really, really key. So when I say that keep stats on the process, here are quick 3 stats that I'd suggest to take on the process. You need your assimilation rate. What is that? That is, how many guests do we assimilate into our church, right? How many people out of every 100 are becoming members to our church? That's a really key. That's like the first thing in guest services you need to keep. The second thing, what is the turnaround? What is the turnaround for guests to come back? Your pastor would love you for this. If you're an associate pastor, if you could tell him, hey, pastor, on average, our guests come back after 2 weeks, not 3. So maybe we should start a sermon series here, not there. Maybe after Easter, we shouldn't have a big, massive thing. Why? Because our guests don't come back. They take 2 to 3 weeks to come back. So find that gap. That was so big for us at Southern Hills, is finding, hey, pastor, we shouldn't start here. We should start a few weeks later. It'll breathe life into him and relief some of those pressures. And pastor, if you're a senior pastor in the area, think about how beneficial that could be if you knew when guests were typically coming back after those big Christmas and Easter Sundays. Starting sermon series in the right thing. So your assimilation rate, your comeback percentage, or your timing and when they come back. And then the last thing that you want to know, the last thing that you really want to decide, and I guess it isn't a stat, is how long a guest stays a guest before you kiss them goodbye. You really got to draw that line and draw that box, or your group is just going to balloon to where it gets out of control. The suggestion for me is somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks, depending on how city or how rural your church is. Keep that. And then after a guest didn't come back for 8 weeks, look, put them in a bigger group of people, text them twice a year about Christmas and Easter, and hopefully you'll get them back the next time. But I hope this has been beneficial to you. I know I've thrown a lot at you. I look forward to the breakout sessions. Jason, Kylie, I think that's 15. I think my time's up, and I want to give these guys enough time to discuss it. So thank you guys for having me. I love being with y'all, and it was a great honor to be able to do so.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Blake. I appreciate that. We've got breakout rooms going right now. Before we send you guys to the breakout rooms, I'm adding Blake's 4 questions to the chat. You can copy and paste those. I'll read them real quick, and then we'll break out into our rooms today. Number 1, how do you identify a guest? Number 2, what is your process of finding second-time guests? Question 3, what is your next step you're leading your guests to? And then question 4, when does your guest stop being a guest? Really good stuff, Blake. I appreciate that. We're going to go into the breakout rooms now.
Okay, guys, so starting with those questions. Jason, you put those in the chat, correct?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, great. Got it right there. Okay. So how do you guys identify, well, first of all, where are you guys coming from? Ryan, I know you're just below us here in Central Florida, kind of Southwest. Dan Murray, where are you from?
Southeast Las Vegas. Henderson is the name of our town area.
Okay. James. I didn't hear that. Nothing came out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, Baltimore. I was here audio source.
Okay. Yeah, I need to talk to you sometime. You seem to have a really, really chill wife, man, to be able to
Yeah, I do.
pull off. And my wife's always there going, "You better never do that."
I get that a lot from other people. So
Yeah.
yeah, my wife's pretty chill.
Philip.
I'm in Pasadena, California.
California, okay. And then Blake, you're right there. And then, okay, cool. So pretty good. A lot of West Coast here. And then me and Ryan down here in the sunny free state of Florida. And, but let's talk about that first. Identifying a guest. How do you go about doing that in your context? Someone want to speak into that as far as when you, you know, is it a card? What do you guys do to start that process? How do you do that? What is a guest to you? How do you identify that? And I thought it was great that you should eliminate people who are not guests. That was a lesson we learned a long time ago. You have seasons where we have so many people that come to Florida that are just bumping in for a week or two. And, you know, there's no point spending energy chasing people that really, you know, a follow-up, a thank you, but realistically, you're not going to be able to pour into them if they're not here. So does anyone else kind of have an elimination process on who you're not going to follow up on? Maybe that's a good way to word it.
Yeah, I do. We typically send a letter to everyone that comes to our church, everyone who visits. We just send them a letter of thank you. And that's usually, if they don't come back after that, that's usually where it ends. That's typically what we do. We get so many guests that it's like it's really difficult to chase everyone down all the time. We used to go you know, to everyone's house, but that got to be to where there's so much energy every week that it got to be too much. So we typically send a card to everyone, and then if they come back the second week, and then we kind of start opening up text conversations, and I'll open into questions, you know, how you doing, you know, that kind of thing. And then if they come back a third week, then I typically, me and my wife invite them over to our house for lunch. And we try to build a kind of a one-on-one relationship with them.
A personal relationship, that's
Yes.
so important. That's
Yeah.
key.
And that's
Okay.
typical what we do. Yeah.
Yeah, anyone, anything different than that, or that's unique to that?
We obviously identifying we have a host team. So anyone that looks newer gets a gift bag, gets asked the question, is this your first time with us? It's usually the greeters are like that first line of defense, and then they'll turn to our host station nearby. Everyone gets a gift bag if it's their first time. And obviously we push the Connect card, physical and digital. And then beyond that, if we get that golden piece, that Connect card, we do a thank you email. I personally do a follow-up text as the associate pastor within that Monday range. And then by the end of the week, our lead pastor will send out a handwritten thank you letter and then a phone call that we can lead it into the next one. So it may be excessive, but we have 4 touch points. And the reason for that is emails are 20% read, text messages are 80% read, and phone calls a little bit somewhere in the middle there if they get answered or not.
Right.
So we definitely want them to know that. Thank you for coming. And a lot of it, Blake and I are in the same town. So we've sat down and had a few coffees, just kind of crafting our process together as well. So.
Yeah, that's incredible. The 35 to 38%. I mean, our goal is 25%. And so you guys are obviously knocking out of the park. I'm going to have a follow-up conversation on our assimilation person, what we are eliminating. I kind of know some of them, but just kind of seeing if there's some things going in there. So layering the process of how you can do that. I think Text in Church is really good at it, but we really didn't want to take their whole process. So just some sort of layering though. So I don't think 4 times is excessive at all. I think it takes multiple connections. Yeah. Okay, how about going to the next one? I think this is probably the thing that most pastors I've talked to get hung up on, or most guys, is identifying a second time. I mean, that's easy for us to do in our kids ministry. It's easy in youth. It's easy in groups. But, you know, man, knowing who's coming back. And so identifying that second guest, who's got some good thoughts on that you have found to be successful in identifying when people come back?
Mike,
I'll struggle with it. Okay, go ahead, Blake.
I wasn't able to get into it, for time reasons, but we actually, we set aside, we have everybody fill out a connection card every week. So we go through an audit, like a first-time guest audit. So I have my list of the last 8 weeks first-time guests in front of me. And then I have literally in our system, attendance, and I type in their name and see if they attended that week. And if they did, I move them to a second timer and I start my second time process contacting, as well as we follow up on Monday. If after we've done that audit, if they didn't respond if it looks like they didn't come, we follow up with, hey, church wasn't the same without you. I know you've only been once, but we consider you part of the family. How was your weekend? And something open-ended like that. But I wasn't able to get into that much of the weeds there. But that's kind of what we do to help identify those second timers. And obviously now the big thing is we all fill out a connection card. But if you don't do that, one of the biggest things I would say is just texting everybody on Monday and just being open and authentic, like, hey, I didn't see you there, or hey, it was nice to see you there. And I think most people understand, especially if you didn't see them. I
have a question for you on that. What is your percentage of attendants that fill out a second card?
Well, because we do it all together, most of our guests will fill out the second card. Like we have literally 3 times in service.
So you're up there with a card saying, hey, let's do this together, as intentionally as maybe I would do it at Easter, but you're doing that every Sunday.
Every single Sunday, Pastor Josh gives me, I ask for 3 at-bats is what I tell him. I need 3 at-bats, man. So for us, it's a video, it's before his message, and it's after the invitation. Almost every week, sometimes a variation of those 3, obviously, but I ask Pastor Josh for 3 at-bats every Sunday. So
now I have not had great success. I don't know you other guys, and I've just chalked it up to I have a bunch of rebels in our church. It's like, it might be because we're in Florida and we're not used to people telling us what to do or something. I don't know, but I've just not had. So I'm getting re-energized by this conversation. I'm going to go at it hard again because, man, I'm coveting your membership rate, their assimilation rate. And so I just want to do a better job. And
Yeah. Hey, Walter. There's smoke coming off of your typewriter, so mute while you're typing there, can you? We can hear that. No, you don't have to go away, man. Mute it. No, I hope everyone heard Jeremy on that, but having a process, I think, is probably one of the hardest ways. Not a process in assimilation. I think a lot of us work towards that, but a process to get information. I know for us, Dale, you mentioned the QR codes. Like, we've had QR codes, I think, Micah, we started those when you were here, didn't we, 3 years ago? And I think over 3 years, maybe we've had 4 guests that have ever used the QR code. People always just fill in the card here for us. So it's just different. But let's go to that second question. What's your process of finding or really following up on second-time guests and identifying second-time guests? What do you guys do? Anybody have something? Michael, what do you guys do on second-time guests?
Well, it's kind of easy for us because we're still a church plant, so we're able to, like, everyone in our church family knows who's there for the first time and who's there for the second time. So we're still kind of in that process, but I try to, at least right now, me and one other guy try to identify people. Each week we write down their names, and then the next week, if we see them, if they come back after we've contacted them through the week, then I or he, one of us, makes it a point to go straight to them and say something to them, connect with them on that day. So it's a little bit different for us because we're a smaller church still, but we specifically write down their names, and it's too specific, kind of like what Blake was saying, put people through the process, 2 specific people that are to that process, identifying who our second-time guests are that week. So,
Hey, Dennis.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tell you about ours. Our church is not a smaller church, and we really have difficulty in that area. So what we've done, what has really helped us, 2 areas. One is our kids check-in center. Both of our services, we have the same people working in our check-in center. They're if you have a child 6th grade and down, they're going to connect you. They're going to know who you are because we have it through our check-in system. It'll identify that how many times they've been there. So we've trained our workers there to be able to identify that, draw them in, connect that, and then they make sure that goes on to our office. And I'm not sure how that happens. We just have really good secretaries that keep up on that. And then they take that information, it goes to a staff member, and they follow up with them, thanking them for coming back to church that second time. The second area that has helped us tremendously, because not everybody goes through the children's wing, is our coffee station. Our coffee station is more than just giving coffee and things out, donuts and out to a guest. We want everyone to come over to our coffee station and get coffee. So from the doors where they come in, they're greeters, they push people there. The people in the lobby, they push everybody there. And then we have people that are trained there, that they're not only giving coffee, but we have several people that are also working there that are identifying second guest or 2 or 3 time guest. So we on purpose are training 2 places, both the main entrances, the children's wing, and then the main entrance of the church. And there's probably a dozen people on purpose that are looking for that second time guest, and they're there faithful every week, and they own that thing. They know who are second time guests more than I know them, and they'll meet people that I don't even get to meet because I just can't get to them. And so that's how we try to maintain and retain the relationship with our guests when they're coming in.
That's good. Luke, go ahead.
Yeah, I have more of a question because we really haven't started this process. We're a small enough church where when a guest shows up, they stand out. And so there's a few of us that, connect with them, get them a visitor's card. We don't really have a connection card. It's more of like, hey, first time guest, where you're from, that kind of a deal. If you're in that boat, based on where you guys are at, where is your starting point? Like, what is the most important step one of this process? Is it the connection card? Is it the greeting area? Like, where would you start based on what you guys have experienced? If I were to say, hey, pastor, we need to do this first, what is that first one? What's the first thing?
Hey, Luke, I would get people, get as many people in your church realizing that they're there to greet the guest. It's a mentality that you have to have in church. And I think this goes from a small church to a large church. We don't have people that just serve coffee. We don't have people that are just checking in children. We have people that are looking for visitors and guests. And it takes a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of conversation. It takes a lot of training, but it becomes the culture of our church. Everybody is looking for guests. And you can't just give somebody a job. This is your job to go find all the guests. You want to get that in the mindset of everybody in your church. Your job, no matter what you're doing, is to identify people that have needs, identify guests, identify second-time guests, and minister to them and push them, whatever funnel you create. If you're the guy they've got to push everybody to, or if you've got a larger staff, everybody is pushing them to that staff and develop that process. But I believe that it starts with teaching people the mentality of, I'm here to serve. I'm here to look for these things. And if you don't do that, whatever process you put in place, you're only gonna have a small group of people that are actually trying to do that.
Thank you.
That's good. Somebody else, you got maybe an answer for Luke. How do you guys get into, what's the process of identifying a guest, and what's the first step? Is it your welcome team? Is it a connection card? You also want to answer that one?
I've seen this. We haven't implemented it here. I'm actually working on redoing our Connect card actually, and we've actually scaled it back a little bit, just name, email, and phone, and then we provide like our social media information, that kind of thing. But Jeremy's exactly right. I mean, it is absolutely a culture you have to create, and unfortunately, a lot of churches that I've been a part of, we kind of have to it's like turning the Titanic to change that. But what I've kind of implemented here is the idea that as if you make a connection with a visitor, just like right there in that moment, be like, hey, well, did you fill out a Connect card? That way we can get in touch with you a little more there. And that mindset is to have that kind of mindset for your people. But also, I've seen it at other churches, in particular, another church in South Carolina that I went to. They literally, their Connect card was like, it was like a whole half a sheet, and it was like bright blue. And they had trained their people so well that when they saw that bright blue, they were like, that's a visitor. And like, they would not necessarily mob them, but they recognize that as like, that is a visitor. We're going to go say hi to them. We're going to invest in that kind of thing in that moment. And so, but I mean, I like I said, we haven't done that, but I've seen that, and it was just kind of amazing to see that they had trained their people that way. That's a visitor, because it was an oversized blue card, that they were walking around with it stuck out of their Bible, or they were just holding it in their hand, that kind of thing. So
awesome. Thank you.
Hey, let's go to that third question. What is the next step that you're leading a guest to? And of course, Blake kind of talked about trying to get a coffee appointment with somebody and being able to lead them down what's their next step in their personal growth. So what about you? What do you have implemented? What's the next step that you're trying to lead people to, and how do you get them there? Chris, what do you think?
Well, we would define a guest as somebody who's not wearing a tie, has the wrong Bible translation, or colored hair. And so the next step would be trying to fix whatever is broken with them, and go from there.
Can you ever just be normal, like give a normal answer? I mean, does it always have to be something weird? Dale, how do you live with this?
Why we don't ask Chris questions?
Yeah, well.
Pray for me, man. Pray for me.
All right, well, on a serious note.
In seriousness, our next step is to push them towards towards like a Foundation 101 class, which is our membership class, and go through salvation, baptism, that sort of stuff with them.
Good. Somebody else, what's the next step you're trying to lead someone to? And of course, I really think this is kind of a, everybody's different question, right? But how do you maybe tag on, how do you get that appointment with them what do you guys do on your assimilation process? What's your follow-up look like? Do you schedule a coffee appointment like Blake was talking about? For us, we actually try to have someone follow up. We still deliver a pie or cookies to people. It works well for our area, and people enjoy that. We've done it since we started, and that's our second step with folks. So what's your second step to try to get someone to come back, Chris?
So one of the things that we do, we keep track of everybody in Breeze. And so they're tagged with Foundation 101, 201, 301, 401. And so if they have never had Foundation 101, doesn't matter how long they've been in the church, they're going to get every time we offer the class, they're going to get an email or a text from us saying, hey, we'd love for you to participate. So they're going to hear it from the pulpit as an announcement. They're going to get an email or a text message concerning the upcoming class. For anybody who is not already tagged with that. So we keep track of who's been, so they could have been in our church for 10 years. And if they've never been through Foundation 101, we're going to send them the invite. So.
We do, we give out information about our church. We have a little packet that we hand out with Constitution in it, so they can read over it if they want. But we definitely open it up for questions and answers.
Okay, cool. I like that idea. All right, somebody else. What's your step? What are you trying to lead people into?
We have several different steps trying to connect with these people, but for a while back, we decided to do a new member luncheon on Sunday afternoons about once a quarter with my wife and just whoever is interested in membership. They're not necessarily becoming members, but I've changed that just on our desire to grow. I'll plan a new member luncheon like whenever, as soon as someone is ready, we'll plan it and then announce it so that anyone else can come if they want to. But we'll do one 52 weeks a year if we have people ready to. But it's a great thing to help people answer their questions. They learn about our church, and we do lunch.
Good. Yeah, it's important to have that onboarding, whatever that looks like on a regular basis. Anybody else want to share? What is it? What are you trying to get your guests to do when they come into your church? What's the step you want them to take?
Obviously, you heard ours from Blake. It's the big step is the 4-step meeting, right? We want them to schedule a coffee appointment with one of our team members. And so we're pushing toward that constantly. I think one of the big mistakes is to think the big step is to get them to come back to the church. I think that's a mistake, because if they come back to the church, they can easily blend in, they can easily go out. What we want to do is, we're very aggressive. So what we want to do is have a conversation, find out what we can actually do. So the coffee appointment has been good for us. And we can be aggressive with also presenting ourselves in just such a way that's like, hey, we just want to answer any questions you might have about the church. So the 4-step, what we call the 4-step meeting, is what we push toward.
Good. Yeah, those personal meetings are what we focus on too. If it's a single guy, then I'll usually do that. If it's a lady, my wife will do that. If the couple's coming, my wife and I try to do that together. Once again, we're still small enough where it's us doing it, but that will eventually have to change. Anybody else have anything else that you do for your first step? Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Let's see, is my mic working better?
Yes.
Not as snappy. It was the AirPods, technology.
Gotcha.
I have a question kind of that goes along with that. With COVID and everything like that, we've had a lot of a harder time meeting with people, and actually took a time off of just the personal visits and stuff like that, just as people were uncomfortable with meeting in person for whatever reason. Obviously, we've been back at it for quite a while now, but for the guests that you can, and you guys can probably gauge this, but just from the conversation, maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's a text message of someone who doesn't want to meet in person. I love the, eye-to-eye contact, meeting in person kind of thing over the text and phone call any day. But when you can gauge that a guest doesn't want to meet either in your home, their home, or even at a restaurant, meet up as a restaurant, what would be your next step? Where would you take that from there, especially if there's someone that is returning and you really do want to get them through, like Josh said, that 4-step, thing. You want to be able to figure out what is next for them. What is something you guys would suggest, or what would you do?
So for us, it'd be a phone call or a Zoom call in that circumstance. We're in Florida here, where it's been wide open pretty much the whole time, and most people are used to that. Every once in a while, we'll have a guest come in wearing a mask, and we know, okay, this person's taking things a little bit more seriously, and we try to respect that. But I don't know, what are you guys doing that you've had more, like out in Vegas, you've had more restrictions and stuff like that. Have you had to think of alternate ways to do that?
Yes, I think COVID allows people to lean into their natural proclivities. So if there are more shy individuals, a little bit less, they're not going to necessarily respond to aggressive behavior. What we try to do is, beginning with our guest services team, teach them to read body language. If you're approaching them and they kind of back up a little bit, to say, we just want to drop off this gift and give this to you, and thank you for visiting with us, and just head to the back. There's some nice seats in the back for you. If you want to hang out with us, let us know. And so we attempt to read body language in that way. I think what John brought up earlier, and Jerry, what you're talking about is the fact that people have different personalities, and churches do too. And churches, as they have to kind of contextualize to their culture, have to decide how aggressive they're going to be. Las Vegas is a very aggressive culture, so we lean into that aggressive culture by being very aggressive with most of our guests. We rarely move away from the pattern of what we do, because our church has gotten to the point where it's kind of too large to customize our approach with individuals. And so what we've said, just for a larger church setting, we've said we are going to lose people because we're too aggressive. So 1 out of 10 people are not going to like that. And that's okay, because there are amazing churches in this community that they're going to fall into and they're going to go to. But for us to adjust our pattern would be too, it's cost prohibitive for us to do so. So keep solid on our pattern of what we do. We will push away 1 out of 10 individuals, but we'll gather those 9 out of 10. So depending on what your culture is, and like I said, I really like what John said, once you've really read the culture of your community, the personality of the guests, and then the personality of your church, it's going to help you identify what your pattern is. And then it's going to help you, the size of your church, I think, is going to help you identify whether or not you can customize an approach to a particular type of person.
Yeah, and people who are not comfortable with those things, they're very comfortable telling you they're not comfortable. So we've had that with just having people over. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, so here in California, like, we're not allowed to do anything. We're just coming out of some of that stuff. But for us too, in California, it's very multicultural. So you have to read different cultures as well. Like a lot of our Filipino community, which is about 1/3 of our church, they all wear masks, and some of them will take it off and hug you, and others will just be like, they barely want to do a knuckle bump. They want to be 12 feet away. So, and you have to figure out all those things. So many of y'all are kind of in that smaller church. I think that customization is really well. And we found that the aggressive nature that, say, a Southern Hills does not work for us, that it freaks people out. So we've had to push off the gas a little bit, because our numbers were over 50% of people not wanting to come out because of the aggression. So very customization, but also your own culture, and then just the realm and what they live in. I'm sure what you can do in Florida and what I could do. Now, for some people, I can do exactly what you do in Florida, but for other people, I can't. And I realized that people that are still in the COVID mindset are really only going to probably come Sunday morning anyway. And so until they come out of it, you just kind of keep them attending before they'll even take their next steps, because they don't want to be in any groups. If they're still ordering takeout for every restaurant, they're really not going to be involved in your church other than sitting there with a mask on, hoping they don't die.
Yeah, one thing that this doesn't necessarily answer your question, but kind of something that we had to take into account here in Seattle, which is probably about as crazy as you can get. We had a first-time visitor that came the next Sunday. We took him out to lunch, and we walk in and they ask for our vaccine card. And here, if you don't have one, you're not allowed to sit inside a restaurant and eat. And he's like, yeah, I don't have one. And so we actually had to turn around and go somewhere else. So a little bit embarrassing, but something you have to adjust to the culture and the location that you're living in. Hopefully that's supposed to be up in about a month, but it's a lot of fun now.
Man, I'm glad I didn't have to worry about that. Great thoughts today, guys. Anybody have any last things you want to share with us about guest retention and assimilation on that? All right.
All right, we are just getting back into the main room here. Hope those breakout sessions went well. I am going to highlight our 3 moderators today, which were Dennis Fountain, Mike Grover, and Thomas Osterkamp. And what I want each of you guys to do, if you don't mind, is just take about 60 to 90 seconds, recap your room, tell us what we missed from not being with you guys. And Dennis, I'm going to start with you. If you want to go first, then we'll go to Mike, then we'll go to Thomas.
Yeah, just a great discussion today. Always enjoy it. Of course, Blake had a ton of great thoughts. A few things that I walked away with, and I think we all did, is something Jeremy Rands mentioned about just connection and getting people involved, is making your follow-up process a whole church involvement, making it part of your culture, having people at every part of the steps. So, you know, if you have people checking in someone to kids ministries, you make sure your kids workers all know how to identify a guest and how to make sure that they're following up on them, and just making it a part of every process. Also had some good ideas about connection cards, and again, Jeremy Rands, really, we could have just had another session with him, just a ton of great information from him. Putting on your connection cards a form where people can fill out what they're interested in, being interested in hospitality or interested in music, or I'm interested in kids ministries or youth or whatever the case might be, because then you can have someone specific follow up on that. And then really just having a process that works for you. You know, we come to Idea Day or come to something like this and we think that's a great idea, but then it doesn't work for you. And so you kind of throw in the hat, but figure out what works for you and your community and your culture, and going with that. A couple of resources, the book Unwelcome, a great book on that. And then Be Our Guest, a good book just on creating a culture of having that welcomeness. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Dennis. Mike?
Yeah, I'd say the thing I would probably drill down is the whole concept of getting a second time card, or knowing they've come back for a second time. It seemed like most of us have had some level of struggle with trying to do the cards where people will fill them out every single week. And so one of the questions was how long they had been doing this at Southern Hills. Well, Josh started that from day one. And so it's been a really established culture. And then also there's 3 asks per service, a video, and then pre-message, and then at the end. But what was striking to me is Blake shared with us a guy he had been working with through this, and it took him 8 to 12 months of doing it before he just got to the point of a majority doing the cards. And so maybe we've tried that and given up too early on it. I know we had pretty much abandoned that, but probably low hanging fruit on that that's helpful if you can't get that every card every week is most of us are checking in our youth and our kids by name. And so there is a concrete record of attendance. So even if you did it with just your families with kids and youth, it's going to kind of leapfrog you forward as far as knowing those second time guests and really working that process differently. And the other thing was, when does a guest quit becoming, or when a guest becomes an attender? And he talked about 3 times there, we had different way, but the question was, what do you do different? And so generally speaking, that guest you're trying to bring in toward you, become a part of you. Once you cross that line, this is an attender, you're trying to move them now more in a growth path, probably in a more intentional early stage of discipleship. So the one you're bringing in them, the other one you're moving forward. So
That's awesome. I love that intentionality. Thanks, Mike. Thomas, you're up.
Yeah, so the main theme that was kind of spread across our group and the different questions we were answering was knowing your own personal context. Like, we should all have a plan. Yeah, we should all have management software and get that up and running, but we have to know and understand the communities that we live in. And we're we're all over the country. So what works for Southern Hills in that atmosphere doesn't necessarily work here in Florida, where it's kind of laid back in Palm Coast where I'm at. So understanding the context with where you live and fitting your plan in with that context, and then really highlighting getting that guest personally connected with somebody. So we're a small church, and so every first time guest, I want to try to get in personal contact and face-to-face meeting with them. And that was kind of the focus of what we were talking about.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. Couple announcements as we get off here in just a moment. Josh Tice next week. You do not want to miss Josh Tice. His talk is the power of one-on-one discipleship. All of us in the network that are here today, those who aren't here today, we've all been personally impacted by Josh and those in our leadership, but one-on-one discipleship, I'm looking forward to that topic that he's going to bring to us next week. A couple more announcements. We got about 3 minutes till we're done here. Get your referrals out there. We started a referral program for the charter membership of the Idea Network to become an official member. We're offering referral. When you refer someone to the Idea Network, they register for the monthly membership. There's a place for them to put the name of the person who referred them to the network. And when you refer someone that joins, once they've been in the membership for 3 weeks, we are giving you a $50 Amazon gift card. Word of mouth is still the best form of advertisement. Again, today is the last day to register at this rate for the Idea Days in Tampa and Chicago. Your charter member voucher that you've got, the big orange voucher, that goes away today. So make sure if you're wanting to use that, today's the day that you use it. The price goes up tomorrow. Tampa is March 22nd, Chicago, March 29th. Register today. Special thanks to Blake Hunt. Blake, thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate the time that you invested in assimilation, helping us with our guest process. Really practical stuff. As I was listening to Blake talk, and I'm sure a lot of you guys thought this too, I just kept thinking, man, this is so practical, but yet we need something like that. And it's basic and it's simplistic. And thanks for putting it down there on the bottom shelf for us today, for us to just understand how we can all improve in our areas of assimilation, getting guests through our door, not just the first time, but after that. That's all I've got. Thank you guys for joining us today. We appreciate you being here, and have a great week thinking outside the box. Take care, guys. We'll see you next week.